Welcome to the Tell Me More podcast, where we invite you to be a part of real conversations with real women as we navigate the normal thoughts, feelings, and events in life as Christian women. I'm Jess McKinney, one of your co-hosts for this podcast.
I am Lydia Florence.
I am Sarah Hopkins.
You didn't say I am Lydia Florence, and I am great with child. I was expecting that.
I know.
Yeah, I am Lydia Florence and a full-grown baby who needs to exit immediately. Honestly, did not think I was still going to be here at this point.
I was
here
nervous, actually. I was like, I wonder if we're going to actually make it to February, because it is February 1st currently as we are recording this. And yeah.
Didn't
think
think
you did.
Look like we've made it. To quote Shania Twain.
Yeah, looks like we've made it.
I almost did it.
It's torture for her.
I know. Okay. Anywho, how are we doing?
Good.
Yeah. Good week.
Yeah.
It's the end of the week.
It's the end of the week for us.
It is. It's Thursday.
Oh, looking forward to it. And
Yeah. It's a game changer to have Fridays off. I don't know how y'all feel about that, but working Sunday through Thursday is like odd but wonderful at the same time. I
Yeah.
have like a little extra bonus
the
day in
Friday
there.
mornings, you feel like, oh, I have all this time and everyone else is working.
Yes.
So you don't feel guilty about
Yeah, my
missing
kids
out on
are in
things.
school.
Yeah.
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 I get so much done on Fridays at the house. It's
Tomorrow's my cleaning day. Yep.
I
Except for
don't-
Saturday. Saturday's sheet day.
Yeah, I need to learn from you. That sounds bad. I need to learn from you because A, you can fold a fitted sheet, which
Yes,
I
I can.
cannot do.
That is wizardry.
I know. B, you are having a really good rotation of like, this is the day that I do this thing. And I want to be that organized so badly. And I'm not.
Well, it's because if I do little bits, then come Saturday, I don't feel like I have to do everything in one go.
Yeah.
So if I do something on Monday, something on Tuesday,
Yeah.
then
Makes perfect sense.
I, on the other hand, the record show that this day is February the 1st. Yesterday, January the 31st, was the day that we finally took down our Christmas lights. So
Wow.
I can't say that we've really been on top of things lately.
Okay.
But
I mean, I feel like you have a good excuse. Yesterday was also Chuck's birthday. So we did
happy birthday,
nothing in
Chuck.
the evening except eat blizzards from Dairy Queen.
I love that.
As
My
you should.
grandparents used to do that. They would just go and get blizzards. They were besties.
Aw.
They were sweet.
That's my goal in life. I
love
want
that.
us to be
That
that way.
isn't, I mean, isn't that really the ultimate
Yeah.
that you want? I just want someone to get a blizzard with.
Yep.
I don't need
Have
the
good
trappings.
conversation.
Yeah.
Have some friends to come over and play cards. I did say that last night to him, and I don't remember what the context was, but I was like, I really hope that when we are older and like retired and all of that, that we have friends who just come over and we play cards every once in a while.
It's
And
sweet that you think you're going to get to be retired.
we shall see. My dad is 75 and he is not retired
Say,
yet.
I don't have that dream.
yeah.
My mom is still working, but
Yeah.
that's, maybe
My
we don't
mom
know.
retired. So, like, I guess last year and a half ago, she retired, which I never honestly thought she would do either. But now my dad and her, like, because he has a flexible schedule, they'll go travel. Like, they texted me the other day and were like, hey, we're going out west this week and this week. Just wanted you to know. And I was like, okay, we'll take you to the airport.
Have
Like,
fun.
I looked at my
awesome.
retirement stuff, and I don't know how to read any of it. I'm really ignorant when it comes to that. To my, I'm sure,
know,
ultimate
I
demise.
know.
But I looked at it, and I was talking to my friend's husband about it because he's much more savvy than I am. And I said, so is this what I get every year? And he goes, oh, no, honey, that's all you have. I went, oh.
yeah, yeah.
So I'll be able to live a year. And
Yeah.
but what a
I
year
know.
it'll be.
I know.
That's going to be a great year for
It's
you.
going to be a great year,
gonna
and
be
then
your
we're just
best
going to
one
call it
yet.
done.
We need that
Take me
commune
home,
we were
Lord.
talking about, where we all move out to your farm.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get on that. Yeah.
But that 1 year of retirement will be wonderful.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. I had a friend who looked at their retirement statement not too long ago and said, did you not just feel so rich when you looked at it? I had no idea what was in there. And I was like, no. I panicked. I was like, oh, no, I've got so far to go.
Yeah, I can't go into a care facility.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
Nope, I know.
Yeah.
maybe a doghouse. I can maybe do that, but
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, speaking of growing old together, we are going to talk about a topic today that was sent in by one of our listeners. So thank you once again for sending that in. Side note, you can still send those in. I do believe the link is still at the bottom of the page.
Please do.
Yes. So please do that. We would love to hear from you. But today we are going to talk about healthy dating and marriage. And when I read this, I have to tell you guys, I'm going to date myself here. In the paper, there used to be the Dear Abby columns. Do you remember that? Okay.
Yeah.
And some of them were the funniest things I'd ever heard. It was like Jerry Springer, but in the newspaper, where I'm like, I can't believe this made it into this issue.
But it
or
does kind
whatever.
of make you feel better about yourself sometimes.
sure.
You're like, well, at least I'm not as bad off as that person.
And some of them were totally normal and understandable. And I think a lot actually had to do with parenting, but I can recall quite a few that were relationship advice. And I'm sitting here thinking, firstly, that is in the paper. So everybody's
everyone to
reading
see.
that. I hope you left out lots of details because I'd be mortified, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, I just thought they were funny. I should have done my research and brought some so we could read them because that would have been hilarious, but I
We're
don't
not
think
that
that
good.
far ahead. No.
And also, this is not, if people are looking to us.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. Also, we're not going to give advice. So, I mean, we may, but it doesn't mean that
what
it's
we've
what
lived
you should
through.
do.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I don't necessarily want to like split this up in any way. I think we're just going to kind of chat and see what we're seeing. I do want to say that, from my perspective, at least, a lot of what I'm going to talk about is from the perspective of inside the church. So I'm not looking like globally, this is the trend in women or whatever. It's just inside the church. What conversations have I had? What things have I experienced in my own life or in the lives of my friends? Those kinds of things. So coming at all of it from like a biblical perspective and knowing that we share the same values. So I think that's the only like box I would put us in. Outside of that, it's up for grabs. So I'm not going to call this a trend. I think I did before we started talking, but I don't know what else to call it. What are you seeing lately happen inside relationships, whether that's dating or even before dating, like things that you hear girls talk about when they're talking about what they're looking for in a guy, or inside of marriages? Like, what are you seeing that is either different or that you've seen become like a big deal of late, or just, I don't know. Like, one of the things I'm thinking of is I've talked to a lot of girls about like their expectations going into dating, and they are high and unrealistic, I would say, which is different from when I was dating. Like, when one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got, and that I'm telling girls now, I'm like, just date. Go on a date.
Yes.
You don't have to marry the guy.
Nope.
Like, just, you got to figure out what you're even looking for in a spouse, you know? So let's set that whole thing aside and just go on a date.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's just a date.
But it is totally outside the norm now. Whereas when I was growing up, that was more normal. And I would say the age even before me, it was even more normal to just be asked on a date, go out on a date, see what happens.
Well, it was you and I, Lydia, have talked about this a little bit. It was the ushering in of the I kiss dating goodbye nonsense.
Yeah.
And how you miss that is impressive to me.
I honestly don't know how you did.
Yeah. Because
As my parents.
And I will say, my mom would look at that and go, that's silly.
Yeah.
Like, you should date, because mom
Right.
loved a good date.
Yeah.
I
love that. I love that.
I remember reading it, and it felt like, oh, this makes sense. This must be what it looks like. But also not buying into it because it's not what I've been kind of taught and shown. And I remember coming home, and on my bed was the book. It's called I Gave Dating a Chance, because my grandmother found out I was reading the other one, and not knowing, I thought the other one was just silly.
Yeah.
She was like, no. So she got me the counter to that of why this is important.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And I was like, no, dating is really important. But walking into then a culture of like Christian bubble, we just screwed it up. You can't ask someone on a date unless you're ready to marry them, unless they're perfect,
Right.
the material for your husband to be. Don't even look at him. Don't even talk to him. Don't flirt. Definitely don't flirt. Don't let him know you're interested until he has talked to your father and given a truckload of goats to him. I mean, it's ludicrous, but I think that screwed us up.
Yeah, I think having high expectations is a good thing. Like having right expectations is a good thing. But especially early on, like in the dating world, yeah, we definitely came out of a culture where I remember when my parents gave me the book I Kissed Dating Goodbye, and they did in their best intentions, and I believe that. But that did not work on me. Like, I think for some people who came out of that culture, like what happened was then they became fearful of like going on a date, or like, I'm going to make one wrong step and it's going to be detrimental to my entire future or romantic life. Yeah. I swung the pendulum the other direction and said, this is garbage. I don't have to listen to any of this. Right. And made a lot of really unhealthy choices in my dating relationships early on as a young person. But yeah, I think that what you were talking about expectations is sometimes people go into these relationships, even within the church, and the expectations, especially at the beginning of a relationship, I'm like, this is impossible. You have been shaped more by what you've seen on social media or in rom-coms or whatever. And what you are expecting of this other person is astronomical.
Yeah. Right.
He didn't text me back 30 seconds after I walked in the door. Can you chill?
Well, okay, and I'm going to get emails for this. But the whole location sharing thing drives me crazy.
I love it.
Okay.
Why?
But I didn't do it until, like, Tristan and I had each other's locations when we were friends, because all of our friends had each other's locations. But then
that's different.
Yeah, it is different. But when it becomes like a stipulation in a relationship, that to me is building a foundation of distrust in some way. Yeah. And it's weird.
Okay, so maybe I won't get emails because she's with me. Okay.
Didn't watch Dateline growing up.
Yeah. Well, there's that.
I mean,
Chuck and I started sharing locations with each other 2 years ago. We've been married for 19 years. Now, part of that is that wasn't a thing. Couldn't do that when we got together. But also, even once you could, I was like, I totally get it. When I have kids, yes, I want to be able to make sure that, like, I can get to them if something happens. I can make a phone call, though, if something happens to me. You know? Like, I don't need everyone that I know having my location. And it's fine if it's your friend group and whatever. Like, those are people that you're in your life that you trust and whatever. But I can't. It's like going on a date with someone, or 2 dates or 3 dates, right? And then I almost feel like that's expected now.
That's weird.
And I'm like, why? I don't know. Because then you have to stop that at some point. And, like, I don't know. It's just interesting. But I just think that's one more way that, like, we set the expectation or the bar, like, so high. The other thing I would say is I feel bad for men because we have put such unrealistic expectations on them that they could never live up to, especially when they're younger. They're still figuring it out too, so I don't know. I think the grace side of that's the other thing that I see, where I'm like, y'all just, like, you're all figuring it out. And you won't know until you try going on a date whether you think this person could have a great conversation with you or not. Yeah. You won't know what you value about them yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes, especially in young people, like early 20s, who are dating, their expectations of their peers that they're dating is, like, maybe a fair expectation to have of a, mature 35-year-old, but not of a 23-year-old.
Exactly.
And that was true for me too. Like, the person that I am now is hopefully more mature and more relationally savvy and a better communicator and more gracious and all of those things than I was in my early 20s when I was dating. Yeah. You have to look, like, are the key ingredients there? Because if the key ingredients are there, you're going to grow together. Right. If this is a person that's worth pursuing, but it's not fair to put the expectations that they're going to know everything, that they're going to
complete you in every way.
Yeah, that they're never going to make a relational misstep, that they're never going to hurt your feelings. Like, newsflash, we all do that. Amen. But if the key ingredients are there, then the hope is you'll grow together over time. Yeah. But right there at the jump, you just can't expect everybody to know everything.
Yeah, and I think what you said about right expectations is true, because I don't think any of us are saying, like, yes, we want you to settle for something that you know is not good for you or whatever. Absolutely not. Like, it should be a priority that they know who the Lord is, I think. Like, there are some things that, like, it's important to make sure that you have done your research on. But you don't have to know the ins and outs of every bit of their life and judge their past and all of that on the first date. You know, I think there's a lot of health that comes from those conversations happening over time too, as you're ready to talk about them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Chuck and I got married young, but like we'd known each other for a little while. We'd had conversations about things, and some of the best ones that I think that we've had early on were before we were even dating. Like they were just, I don't know, they come up randomly, you know, and then I'm like, oh, we've talked about that. That's great. Okay. You know, so when we started dating, it was a lot easier. I knew that his family went to church, and that was about all I knew about his family when we started dating. And I was okay with that because I knew what his heart was. So, you know, there was lots of things that I was like, we can talk about those later, but they're not deal breakers for me. Like, I like you. You're cute. I want to go on a date with you. We have good conversation. You love God.
Yeah.
Done.
That's all you need.
I know.
It almost feels like we're launched into these false intimacies with people, because you can see everything that they've ever done because it's laid out in their Facebook, Instagram, whatever account they're using, or you can research their employment history. Known girls who will do that. Like get on LinkedIn and see everything they've done. I'm thinking, and now you go on the date and there's nothing to talk about. You know everything, so now you have to pretend not to know anything. So now you're a liar. And you're bringing that in. Like there's just no.
That's funny.
Listen, girls do better research than the FBI, and I stand by that.
Oh, for sure.
Myself included.
Yeah. And everyone has a friend who can find that information faster than anyone in the world.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad I dated 20 years ago.
It doesn't get better in your older ages.
Well,
like it's the looking for someone, you know, who's in your 20s, you're looking for that more idealistic grown up.
Right.
And then you meet them when they're grown up and you think, what's happened?
Yeah.
And how do I respond to a guy who's had a lot of trauma or a lot of hurt and now is bringing that and to steward that well? And how do you say yes to that? Or no, it's a mess.
You definitely have to have more mature conversations when you're dating, when you're older. Because I have lots of friends who also have been divorced and are now back in the dating world. And they're like, oh my goodness, where do I even start? Because it is not the same because it's like, A, it's dating's just different. But B, you're in a totally different stage of life. And so the people you're meeting are in a different stage of life. And they have been through stuff.
Yep.
So you do have to have some different conversations and a lot more maturity, especially emotionally, I think, to be able to put yourself out there and find wholesome people that you can trust. Yeah. Ugh, wow.
It's great.
What about in marriage? What are you seeing in married relationships, or have you heard from friends or anything like that?
I mean, even within the church, like I've seen a lot of divorce, and divorce is such a hard and terrible thing. And
but no one believes that.
I mean, I think most people in the church that I know who have gotten divorced didn't want that for their life. Right. They didn't want that. Right. And, you know, the circumstances surrounding those vary far and wide of like what led to that. But regardless of what led to it, if that is the outcome, it is always difficult. There is always hurt. There's always pain. There's always scars. And believers aren't immune to that, unfortunately. Like the divorce rates inside the church aren't all that different from the divorce rates outside the church. And I would love for that to not be the case. But even just, you know, I've only been married for 5 years, and I think about all of my peers that like I went to school with, that I went to college with, and how many couples I know that I went to school with who are already separated or divorced. And I just like, I grieve for them and think, man, what happened there? Like what went askew? Was it something that could have been on the front end, that with a little more guidance or good counsel or patience or whatever, could this have been avoided in the first place? Or was there something in the marriage that broke down? And that's not up to me to know with most of those things. But it does break my heart and make me want to, I want the church and I want believers to be able to have a better foundation and strength so that we don't see that happening as often.
I don't think people believe it will be as traumatic and devastating as it is.
Yeah.
Like it'll be fine. Our kids will be fine. They're resilient. And it just destroys so much.
Yeah. And I think there's so many facets of it too, because divorce, like you said, happens for a number of reasons.
Right.
And some of it, I think, is because of a lack of communication. I mean, I've had a number of conversations with folks where like the other person just didn't know how they were feeling, you know?
Yep.
So there's that, which is vital to any relationship. But then on the flip side, there are circumstances where you get it. Like you understand. And I think sometimes when you've been through something like that, there's a lot of guilt that you feel when you're inside the church, because you're like, divorce is not something that I've ever been raised to think is okay, but here I am in it. What do I do with that? You know? So I think there's a grace piece in there too, where there are marriages that are not going to work, either because you got into it and didn't realize what you're getting into, or something just awful happened, or like, there's all kinds of things in there. But I also think like one of the things growing up that I didn't hear a lot, and I can remember struggling with as a kid, because I would see, like, I had family members who were divorced. I had friends whose parents were, and then now as an adult, plenty of friends who have gone through it themselves. And I remember struggling with like, wait, is this bad? What, how do I reconcile that? How do they, like their kids would be sitting there going, I've always been taught this is not okay, whatever. And I'm kind of like, it's just like anything else. There's redemption. Like, we don't talk about that very often. I think we should.
Stigmatized hugely within the church, which is heartbreaking, because not only is this person, your brother or sister, their world is crumbling, and then you're looking at them going, well, you failed.
Yeah.
Are you
or they're
kidding?
thinking that of themselves.
Yeah. And I don't like that.
Yeah, I think we need both, like the support in place to know how to strengthen against that, and to do preventative care before you get to the point of divorce. Yeah. Because it breaks God's heart, but also to be able to walk with extreme grace and tenderness and love with those who have gone through that, and say, there's hope. There's hope for you. Yeah. This isn't too big for God to redeem. Yeah. And the outcome of the redemption, again, looks different. Like the way that God chooses to redeem divorce as a part of people's stories doesn't always look the same. I've seen people literally get remarried after divorce, which is insane. Yeah. And I've also seen people who are able to walk forward in life, and that relationship may never actually be restored in the same way that it was, but they're not experiencing less of the redemption that Jesus offers. Right. It just manifests in a different way. But we need both. We got to figure out as believers and as a church how to come alongside marriages that are struggling and also marriages that have ended, and say, how can we love you like Jesus does?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think regardless of whether we're talking dating or marriage, it's hard work. Yeah. Period. Because we're all human. And I do think there is an element in both facets where it is hard. And sometimes when the going gets tough, you're like, nah, not worth it. You know what I mean? So I do think, like, just acknowledging that it's hard. Yeah. I love being married to my husband, and it's hard sometimes. I get it, but that, I don't know, we're stronger for the conversations we have because of those hard times. Yeah. So
I think it's good to remember that neither party is part of the Psychic Friends Network.
Yep, that's true.
So expecting, because we're talking more about what we as women can do in those situations.
Yes.
We're not giving advice for guys.
Nope.
We'll let Hatfield do that. We can only control our side.
Exactly.
And to look at him and go, well, he didn't ask me how I was feeling. He didn't. Well, did you offer it up, sis? Are you just waiting for him? Then you're playing a manipulative game because you want to say something and you're waiting for him to do it.
Yeah. Oh, man, I am guilty of that. Like that. Honestly, still is one of the things that I have to remind myself of the most in my relationship, because Tristan is the kind of person that will get home and he just immediately offers up everything that happened that day. What he ate for lunch, who he talked to, what happened. Which is funny because he's super introverted and generally much more quiet than I am. But in our one-on-one relationship, he is by far way more forthcoming with stuff like that. And he just shares his life with me, which I'm grateful for. Yeah. And I am the one who will sit and twiddle my thumbs and think, is he going to ask me about my day? Is he gonna, and I won't just get into it. And I have to remember he's not a mind reader any more than I'm a mind reader. No. So that's not a fair expectation. And even that is a conversation we had of saying, hey, I like it when you ask me about these things because it helps me to enter into it more than just getting home and talking about it, which is not my natural bent, is not just to get home and be like, here's everything that I did today and here's how I'm feeling. That's really not how I'm wired for the most part, but that's not an excuse. It's an opportunity for us to grow in communication. But I'm absolutely guilty of that. I wonder though
if him, his natural bent being to tell you everything is his invitation for you to respond in kind. Yeah. Because that's what he would do.
Exactly. And that's the viewpoint he's coming from. Is like, oh, well, this is normal for me. Yeah. And if she had something to tell me, she'd tell me.
Right.
you know? He's not being malicious in any way.
I might be Team Tristan.
I was going to say,
you should be. I'm definitely Team Tristan.
I'm the person that comes home and is like, here's how I'm feeling. Here's what happened today. I'm going to tell you all about it. Yeah. Or Chuck. He listens to all of it.
I think I was listening the other day to, I don't know, it's Chris Stapleton and his song Fire Away. And I'm not kidding. I started sobbing because I thought that's what I want is someone who could look at me and go, just let loose. Yeah. Because that's what I have with God. Right. Yeah. Truly that's what I have. But for someone to look and I could just say everything and them to be so secure in who they are in the Lord that they're not going to get offended by me just out. I was like, that's the perfect moment.
I know.
Oh, that might be my new favorite love song.
I love that. I love Chris Stapleton, too.
I love Chris Stapleton.
I didn't try to sing that song, so I'm feeling much better about that.
I'm singing it in my head. Just because, it moved me. I thought,
it's a good one.
Yeah. That's deep on a level I hadn't realized years ago.
Yeah. Also, that man can sing. Can we just appreciate that for a minute?
Can we appreciate that he's from Eastern Kentucky?
Yes.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
The best are.
Chuck started listening to the Steel Drivers, I think, which was what he was in before he went solo. And he was on a show, right?
That I don't know.
Or something?
Chris Stapleton?
Wasn't he on The Voice?
I feel like he was a writer for a long time. Did I make that up?
Was he on a show?
I think he did.
Okay.
I don't know.
Maybe
he was. But I feel like he was a writer for a bunch of people.
Somebody look it up real quick.
This is so not what we're talking about, but most of the really good ones are from, there's a very particular pocket of Eastern Kentucky, and they're all from that area.
Interesting.
It's really interesting.
But folk songs and stuff, we've gotten so off topic. I'm sorry. But folk songs and stuff like that, that was a big deal. You know, when you think about oral history and all that kind of stuff, that was a big deal. So, anywho.
That's my favorite love song. Gladiator is my favorite
love
movie.
Like I made this up now, but I swear I saw him on some show. Anyway,
was it a music award show?
I was going to say, was it the CMA?
Was he with Justin Timberlake?
No, he wasn't.
I know what you're talking about.
But yes, that was amazing.
I'm obsessed with that video.
Yeah. I made my whole family watch it one day. It was
incredible.
Okay. Anyway, so we've gotten down into expectations, which I want to talk about in a minute. But before we get there, when you think of healthy relationships when it comes to dating and marriage, and I know we could go a million places with this, but what are the characteristics of that you see? In the couples that you see that you're like, they've figured it out. What is it that you're seeing? What is it about that? Is it security, maybe?
I feel like I'm thinking of one couple that I just look at and go, they are goals. But they are both fiercely...
They are goals, because I know who you're talking about.
And they are both really independent. However... They are best friends. And he dotes on her. And she dotes on him, but in very different ways. You can see their personalities in the way that they do it. But he'll go do his thing, and she goes, great, I'll go do my thing. And then they go together and do their thing. And there's just, I think there's that security in who they are and who they are to one another that just makes it, you go, now that looks good.
Yeah, I feel like you just said like the two top things that I would think of, which is one, really healthy relationships don't look to each other for something that they can only get from God. So they're really secure in who they are, and they've got their priorities straight in like, I'm not relying on my spouse or my boyfriend or girlfriend to give me something that I know I can only get from God.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they're really good friends.
Yep.
Like, I think that friendship is the bedrock of really healthy, long-lasting relationships. In all the healthiest ones I've known, they're buddies. They like each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I do think so. Chuck and I were friends before we started dating. So yes, I totally agree. I've also seen some couples though who have met, like been attracted to each other, ended up getting married, and their friendship really developed during the course of their marriage. And like very quickly they were like, oh yeah, you're my person, you know, but they actually weren't friends before, which I think is interesting coming from the flip side of that. I'm like, I love how the Lord can take both. Yeah. But either way, he does provide that companionship element. And it's more than just, I have a spouse now.
yeah.
Yes.
It's like, I have a friend for life.
Yeah.
Basically, which I love.
We try too hard for the Hallmark garbage version of relationships because it looks pretty and looks really good when in reality most of us are the product of Oregon Trail relationships where someone looked at someone else and said, you have what I need, I have what you need, and we're gonna make this work.
Yeah.
And it actually, when you really start to dissect it, that's far more valuable. It's honest and it is long suffering.
Yeah.
And it's just, to me, it feels safer.
Yeah.
Yeah, sue me. I don't believe in soulmates. Like I don't
either.
I don't buy into it in that I believe that we get to choose who we love, and God providentially sometimes brings people into our life. I'm not denying that.
Sure.
But the moment that I chose to marry Tristan, he became my soulmate then.
Yeah.
But he was not like this person out there who was destined for me that if I didn't find, that was my one and only shot.
Right.
Like I don't buy into that.
Right.
I
Well,
think
sure.
you know?
Yeah. Chuck's grandfather has been married twice, and both of them were the love of his life. Like, I mean, he never thought he'd get married again, but she passed away and he found another lovely woman, and they were real happy together.
Yeah.
And then she passed away, and he is still around.
Yep.
And that man is strong. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I was having a conversation with my aunt, and she was just she was revealing all of the kind of the family secrets that aren't really that crazy, but oh yeah, so and so was married. I had a husband before, and I'm going, what? Almost my entire family had been married before, and then had gotten remarried.
Yeah.
And thank God for his redemption, because the people that they were married to were, as it turned out, pretty terrible people. And then the Lord brought them, you know, my uncle, who is just the kindest, gentlest man in the entire world, and serves her. And like, well, at this, still, he's 70 plus years old. When I was there to visit, he was under my car because something was broken. And he came in and was like, I fixed it.
Yeah.
What? Like, but had she not gotten out of the awful relationship she had been in before, the Lord wouldn't have blessed her with this. Yeah. You know, or she wouldn't have been in position for him to do that.
I was going to say, my grandmother is the same way, because she was married once and had my dad and his brother, and they got divorced. And there were lots of reasons that I won't go into, but I totally understand why it ended up happening. And God brought another musician. So she married a musician, and then she married a second musician. I know, it tracks. But she was like, he was so kind and so selfless in how he dated me. And it was so different from what she had experienced the first time around. And I got to tell you, literally until she passed away, that man made her a cup of coffee every morning, every single morning. And I was just like,
that's all I want.
Yep. I mean, honestly.
We found, after my grandfather passed away, I had known he had been married before, but you never talked about it. And he was very young. And Mom had said, yeah, my grandmother said it was because they all thought that she was lazy. And I'm not kidding. On the divorce papers, it says that's his given reason. Was that
what?
She was just really lazy. And then it said, she disputes this.
Wow. Okay.
Terrible. But then he marries my grandmother, who was like a workaholic. And I thought, you see what he valued.
The pendulum has swung the other way.
Oh, my word.
Wow.
But I always thought that was really funny.
Is that one of the boxes that you can check on the form? Really lazy.
I mean, it shocked me. Like the way that they said it was the most lawyer way you could say this person is lazy. And I remember my grandfather would always try and fix us up with people that he didn't know. And he'd be like, Granddaddy, they're not, no. And he'd be like, well, they're a hard worker.
Right.
That's all you need.
That was his value.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh.
So, but thank goodness he did, because otherwise I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, honestly.
And thank goodness you are.
I'm glad you are. Anything else that you think of when you think of healthy relationships? I mean, we've talked about the Lord being a priority, but I think the healthiest relationships I've ever seen, yes, they're best friends. But they're also pursuing the same thing.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that their interests are the same, but they are secure in the fact that the Lord is priority above everything else. And there are other healthy relationships. I'm not saying that there aren't outside of the church for people that don't believe, but I think there's something special about what's created when you are actually living 120% into the Lord's design and chasing after him as an individual, and your significant other, partner, whatever, is doing the same thing, and you are both tracking towards the Lord, because he does bring you together in that way.
You do not date potential.
Yeah.
You just don't do it.
Yeah.
Like I think he'll turn out to be good. He either is now, and you can marry who he is now with the expectation that he never changes.
Right. Yeah.
What if he doesn't? Yeah. And are you okay with that? And if so, go forth and multiply.
I always tell younger girls now, I'm like, here's the deal. You're putting your best foot forward right now. And so's he. This is the best foot forward. When you get married, you see all the messy underneath. Okay. So if you're not happy with right now, you're definitely not going to be happy with later.
Nope.
Yeah, and the beginning stages of a relationship should be fun.
Yes.
Like, you know, it's the chase. It's the most flirtatious. It's the most whatever. And
there's a
so
little mystery in there.
if you're having a lot of trouble right from the jump, that might be a good signal that it's like, hey, you don't have to keep going with this. If it's not working, it's okay if it's not working.
Yes.
And there's let there be chase, but also don't run so hard that he's like, this is unattainable.
This is impossible.
Don't, I mean, honestly.
Yeah, I think in healthy relationships, especially long-term marriages, like the little things are the big things, you know? I think sometimes when, especially girls, think about what they want in a relationship or the expectations or what a healthy relationship looks like, sometimes they think of like these grandiose gestures of love and romance and surprise and, you know, whatever. And those things are not bad necessarily. It can be really exciting when that happens. But in long-term healthy relationships, it's the little things. It's the cup of coffee every morning. It's the sitting on the couch and saying, like, one of the things I think of is I love to watch Jeopardy. Love it. It's my favorite TV show. Tristan doesn't give a hoot about Jeopardy, but he knows that I love it. And so when I get home, he'll let me sit down, and he knows that I don't want to watch it unless I have somebody else watching it with me, and he will sit down and he'll watch it, and it's like my football. I yell at Jeopardy the way that men yell at football.
That's amazing.
And like, it's that kind of thing that's like, the little things are the big things. And when relationships are healthy, each person is trying to outdo the other in service of each other. Not to say, well, what are you doing for me?
Right.
How are you appreciating me? How are you surprising me and doting on me and whatever? And again, those aren't bad things, but that's not the framework you're coming from. It's what can I do to serve the other person?
Yeah.
What can I do to elevate them, to appreciate them, to love them, to serve them, to put them first? And if both parties are doing that, you've got a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's where it starts to fall apart, is when you get into the cycle of he's not A, so I won't B. And then he says, well, she won't A, so I won't B. And then it just gets in this circle. When biblically, there's not that out. It doesn't say you should serve and respect your spouse as long as they're doing this.
Yeah.
Your response is out of obedience to the Lord, regardless of theirs.
Yeah.
And it is really awful and difficult when they're not. It does make it really hard, but that doesn't mean that your obedience can change to the Lord.
And to follow up on that, it also does not mean that you should never have a conversation.
Yeah.
Because that's the other key piece to relationships. You have to communicate well with each other. And that, I mean, some of those conversations are going to be awful. Awful. But they always lead you towards some sort of solution. And if you never, like, one of the biggest things I keep coming back to is unspoken expectations. If you never say, this is something that I really need, they will never know. Ever. And that can really harbor resentment over time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that resentment leads to a whole lot of negative results in the long run. You may not see them right away. And it's not just in the other person either. It's also in your own heart. So that's vital.
Can you speak to when you have made that known and it still isn't being given?
Yeah. And that's a possibility too, because there have been many times that Chuck will always say, he's like, I'm not a romantic person. And I'm like, I understand that. Totally get it. Just saying every once in a while, this would be super great. And we've talked about that a lot. And I think it's more of a heart posture thing for me going, I have done what I can do. And now it's up to the Lord. And he'll fix what he can fix. And he won't what he won't, which, I mean, there haven't been like any gigantic hurdles that he's not been able to find solutions for. But even in the small things, I think like even those can build up over time. So at some point you just have to go, this is what I can control. How I respond, how I react, what I communicate, and how I love. And the rest of it is up to the Lord. And it may be a real long, arduous journey because I'm not seeing what I'm hoping for come to fruition. And there's some reason for that is beyond my understanding, and that's where our faith comes in, because it's not going to be easy and it is going to be hard work. But that's all that we can do.
And the Lord can handle your disappointment.
He can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like I'm learning to be really honest with him about my disappointments in life.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't make it untrue. It doesn't make me less disappointed.
Right.
But at least he knows.
But I think that's a great model too. Like, in all of this, you're taking that to the Lord. And you're right, he does know. And that's the model that we have to follow in relationships with others too, is being able to have that really vulnerable conversation. And now it's on the table. Where do we go from here?
Yeah. I think like what both of you have said, like taking responsibility for what can I do in this? Like what's my role? Where do I need to be vulnerable? Where do I need to be honest and loving and communicate with grace and truth to say, this is something that I feel that I'm struggling with, or this is something that I need that I'm not really getting from you. Like, can we talk about this? And you got to take responsibility for what you can do. But then if nothing changes, understanding if you've done what you can do, then you just continue on in faithfulness the best that you can. Yeah. And I never, ever want to downplay the sincere pain or struggle or whatever of unmet expectations or disappointment in those relationships, which are literally the closest human relationships that we're in. And yet, I think if we can maintain the understanding and the truth and the perspective that I've already been loved by God today and anything else is just extra.
Yep.
If we can really understand, I literally have everything that I need in the love of the Father and what Jesus did for me on the cross. Anything else is just a gift. Anything else is just extra. That doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt when we don't get that. But it does mean I have a firm footing in what my actual needs are, and they have already been met by the Lord. And if I never got anything else, that is enough for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I mentioned it when we did the guys podcast, but watching my mom release her expectations for my dad was a really good example of that, of her praying the prayer, thank you for the kisses and hugs I haven't received today, because I'm going to trust that you're going to, one day I will get those.
Yeah.
And to be a wife whose husband is just closed off, he's there, but he's closed off. And that disappointment and that hurt and that loneliness, for her to be able to give that to the Lord, I can't imagine the anguish that she went through and what that cost her and what that cost her heart. But I do know the outcome of it was a marriage that when Dad finally got it, when the Holy Spirit finally got his attention, it strengthened their relationship, because her trust was not in Dad changing. It was in the Holy Spirit's power to change him.
Absolutely.
But it was not easy. And she would not sit there and tell you that it was.
Yeah.
But
No, but that wouldn't have even been possible for the Holy Spirit to work in that way if she had let her heart grow into a root of bitterness that was so hard that she wasn't even open to what he could do.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine the sacrifice emotionally, mentally that took on her day by day to release that to the Lord. Yeah. Like, that is a massive, that's a huge burden to carry.
Daily for years.
Yes.
Yeah.
But in her trust of God in that respect, it ultimately did lead to something. Like, that's an amazing story of redemption, but it required a lot of pain and sacrifice and release and
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a good one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Shoo. Okay, so I talked to some people before this podcast and got some suggestions for things we should talk about. One of the things was love languages.
I don't believe in them.
I was going to ask. I was like, how do we feel about that?
I don't feel like strongly against them, but I think it's one of those things that we're like, I feel this and I receive love this way, and it's the only way, so you better do it.
Yeah.
And we can get trapped in it, like with
Yes,
anything else.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm not too hung up one way or the other. Like, I think there's something there that can be really helpful just in the understanding of how another person does feel loved.
Yep.
But I also think that probably for all of us, there's a little bit of all of it. Like,
Yes.
Absolutely.
it's not like the only way that I receive love is through words of affirmation. If you ever try to give me a hug, I won't accept it. Like, I think it can go too far in one direction or the other. So I think they can be helpful, but I'm really not too hung up on them.
So I think the what I took away from the conversation was there's value in knowing the other person and serving them well, whatever that looks like.
Yep.
So Chuck fills up my gas tank randomly, and I don't even know he's done it half the time because I'm terrible about letting that thing run down way too low. So just throw that right out there. But I would not say that I am an acts of service person necessarily, although it is really helpful when that happens and he knows that it needs to be done. I'd say the same thing about my grandmother, like getting that cup of coffee every morning. She just really wanted a good cup of coffee, and he was like, well, shoot, I can make that for you.
Yeah.
So it's really about serving each other and making sure that we're putting their needs at the forefront, as opposed to, you must listen to exactly how I need to receive your love and whatever. Yeah.
I think it's being thought of, and that can play out differently for different people.
Yes.
Like, I have a friend who, if you give her a pencil sharpener, she'll think that's the best thing in the world because you have thought of her, and you looked at that pencil sharpener and you thought, I'm going to give this to her. Yeah. Now, to me, that would be, you're giving me a piece of junk, and please don't get. But you shovel the sidewalk.
Sure.
You've thought of me. You've put gas in my gas tank.
Yeah.
You thought of me. That is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
And I get, but it's not the act. It's the, oh, you thought of me? I'm on your mind?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Me?
Yep.
And then you get all giggly and gooey.
Yeah. I love that. Okay.
Unless you're giving me words of affirmation, then I think you're setting me up.
That's
to
what
put
I
me
was
in the
going to say.
basement.
Now, you very clearly
Shopkins
do not like
hates
encouragement,
some words
though.
of affirmation.
I've gotten better with hugs, though. I like a hug now.
I was going to say I hug you all the time, so I'm so glad. I'm a hugger. It's fine.
I'm a hugger.
Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about is, and we've mentioned this just in general in life, how as women we need to have people who we can lean into and people who we're pouring into. How does that apply to dating and marriage?
I mean, for me, one of the best pieces of advice I got when we were dating was that we needed new models to look at. And what I mean by that is, like, Tristan and I both come from good families who love us, but families with brokenness, just like all of us come from families with brokenness. And we knew that if we were going to break out of some of the unhealth of those things that we were raised in or that we knew we didn't want to do, then we needed to be able to look to something different. And so we spent a lot of time around other families, people who were ahead of us by a few seasons, that helped us see relationships that were more mature than we were. But then we also spent time with friends whose relationships we admired, who were our peers that we also learned from. We were like, well, they're trying this. Maybe this would be good for us to try too. Or this works for them, but it's not going to work for us. And so I think just not isolating yourself, whether that's in a dating relationship or a marriage relationship, is you can't even do your own relationship on an island. We still need to be in community with other people who can inspire us, who we can see the image of Jesus in a different way. And so, that's one.
Yeah, your friends may not always be the best sounding board for advice.
Not always.
I would agree with that.
They love you.
Yeah.
But
especially, I would say that particularly applies to dating.
Yes. Yeah.
If you are, we've had the same conversations with the same people, I think. Because, like, if you are interested in someone and you're talking to your peers who are also trying to find people that they're interested in, and none of you have actually, like, entered the dating world fully, you're probably not going to get great advice or things that have worked because nobody's figured it out yet.
Yep.
So it would be helpful to go to folks who have lived through that and who are able to provide you with, hey, this might be a good filter to use.
Yep.
Or here's what my experience was. And then ask other people what their experience was, because it's not a one size fits all. It will be different for everybody. I totally understand that. But I do think there's like a perpetuation of advice from peers, especially in dating. And it becomes more of a, like, everybody's warning against all the things that happened to them.
Yeah.
Because nobody's figured it out yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is super healthy. It's not going to help you get anywhere.
Yeah.
So I would say if you are dating, especially as a young person, the more that you can seek advice from people who, like you said, are a few years or even a decade or so ahead of you and are able to provide a more experienced filter for what dating should look like, that would be a great place to start. Yeah. But I think the same is also true for marriage. And even at this point, like we'll have people come over occasionally, and I'm always like, you're coming into, like, me and my husband and our kids, and it's messy, like, it's loud, it's chaotic, but we'd love to have you, you know. And as long as they know that, I'm like, this is what you're going to get. But I do think there's value in them seeing, and same deal for me when I go to people's homes, seeing what it's like for folks who do have healthy relationships and healthy families and who are trying to raise their kids now or whatever it may be. You can gain a lot of insight from that and just seeing how it's modeled for you, kind of like you were saying. So I don't know that there's ever a point where really you should stop doing that.
No. Keep inviting people in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would also say one small caveat I would give is, again, pendulum tends to swing one direction or the other. So either people tend to isolate and not want to do that, or I also know some who invite every person that they know to give their 2 cents on the relationship, and that's not healthy.
You don't have to tell everybody your business.
Nope. And you need to give your significant other, whether you're dating or married, the honor and the respect of being discerning about who you share things with. Yes. And so, you know, you don't need to be telling every single person you know all your business. Right. There's a handful of people who should know everything about you. Yeah. Like everything, all your dirt, absolutely. But not 100 people. So not everybody should get to have the same kind of influence into your relationship, and you should be discerning about who you invite to speak into that.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
I agree. The last, I'm going to give a piece of advice here, but this is just something that I've gleaned in my own experience. Dating is great. It's wonderful. You should go on dates. And once you get married, you should keep going on dates and keep dating. It is very easy. And I'll speak from now I have 2 kids running around in my house perspective. It is easy to go, I'm busy. I have stuff to do. Our lives are busy. He's got this going on. I've got this going on. The kids have this, whatever. Just like anything else, you will never be ready or have enough time. So just do it.
Yeah.
Just go. Find a sitter, go on dates, find ways to spend time alone together so that you can keep the conversations going, because they are hard to have in the midst of busyness and craziness, but they are so vital.
After the Lord, he's your number one priority, or should be.
Yeah.
And your kids, I assume, they're wonderful. I've met yours. I assume this one will be great.
Hope so.
And that you love them with every fiber of your being. But if your relationship with your husband is not trumping your relationship with your children, there will be trouble ahead.
Yeah.
Or there's trouble now.
Yeah.
And you're not teaching your children and modeling for your children a healthy relationship.
Right.
Which is really part of our job as parents. Like, we have to model healthy relationships for our kids to the best of our ability.
My friend has a 13-year-old, and she's full 13-year-old right now.
Yeah.
And she was sassing off to her mother and just letting her have it. And my friend said, all of a sudden, from the upstairs, you heard the husband's booming voice. Enough. You don't speak to my wife that way. Go to your room.
Yep.
All right.
Get it?
And I looked at my friend and said, do you know how valuable that was? Because, daddy-daughter relationship, he's my guy. And he just looked at her and said, but she's my wife. And that is, no, you give her the respect she's due. And I was like, that's kind of hot.
Well done.
Yeah, well done.
Well done.
And 2, I wanted to go before I'm afraid we're going to run out of time, but before we go on to go back to the communication piece, to remind people that counseling, if you have communicated and it's still not working, that it's not the end of the world, because you're 2 different people. Bring in a counselor who can help you communicate. Because you may be saying the exact same thing, but because you're saying it differently, you're just going to argue. And so bring someone in who can suss that out.
You want to know a fun fact about me and Tristan? Sure. We spent more money on counseling than we did on our wedding. And we're very open about that. But we both knew we had brokenness, like, coming into our relationship. But my parents especially, once we got to the point in our relationship where we knew this is heading towards marriage, my parents discipled us really well, and they were like, hey, we love you, but you guys got some stuff you got to work through. And they discipled us towards reminding us that your marriage is more important than your wedding. Our wedding was not expensive. We were dead broke, but we spent literally twice as much money going to counseling as we did on our wedding, and we are way better off for it. And we've never been shy to say, sometimes we need to go back. And sometimes there's an acute issue where it's like, okay, we've hit an impasse. We've tried to communicate. We've got something, or there's trauma or whatever it is, where it's like, there is a clear reason why this is a good choice. But sometimes you should just go preventatively. And I am not one to believe that everybody should be in counseling all the time. I think if counseling is working, you shouldn't need counseling all the time. But also, just like we have to go in for a physical checkup once a year, you do your well woman exam, make sure things are fine. Even if there's not an acute problem, sometimes it can diagnose if there's something you need to be looking out for. And same can be true with counseling. It's just like, even if I don't feel like something's really wrong, I am also not going to be naive enough to think that there might be something that I could be preparing better for, or I might learn something new that will help me love him better, or whatever. So Big fan of counseling over here in the Florence household.
I thought of that. Thought we talked about
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Because there are things that you come, I mean, unexpected things in life all the time. And a lot of times they're not related to your marriage, but they affect your marriage. You know, it could be something related to one of your children and how you're parenting, or it could be anything, you know, and it is helpful to have an outside perspective on that where you can go, okay, I'm not feeling all the emotions you're feeling right now. So let me tell you what the facts are. And then we can figure out all the feelings.
You can
after
believe just like someone else, and because you were raised differently, you will raise your children differently, and you will approach discipline differently, and it causes issues.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Anything else? Any piece of advice that you've gotten that were super helpful as you entered the dating world or marriage world that you want to share with our audience?
I don't know.
We've talked about a lot today, so there may not be.
No, I think we've covered the big stuff and everything else. The fun thing is, like, you get to figure out what works for you and your significant other.
Yes.
Our, none of our relationships look exactly the same, but we each get to figure out with this other person what's going to work for us. What do we enjoy? How has God created us to complement and love and serve one another? So
I do think if you're on the dating side, when a guy asks, and if you don't want to go, don't make him feel like a bridge troll for asking you. Just be flattered that this, there is flattery in that he looked at you and thought, she's kind, she's funny, she's pretty, I'm going to ask her out.
Yeah.
Don't make him feel 2 inches tall.
Yeah.
You can say no.
Yeah.
Now, how he responds to that is on him.
It's up to him.
Again, we'll have Hatfield address those ones, but
great.
Be kind. And if you want to go, go.
Yeah.
And have fun.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Have fun. That's what I would say, because there's a lot of hard work in relationships.
Yep.
And even the healthiest of relationships are not perfect, and they will not be. So it's not like there's a prescriptive, if you do all these things, it's going to be perfect. It's not going to be easy, and you're going to have to navigate this stuff. But you just have to set those things in place, like communicating with each other well, making sure you're prioritizing Lord, prioritizing each other. And you will be further down the line, at least, and be able to handle some of the tricky things that come up later on in life, I think.
When it doesn't go well, you have a good story for the next one.
That's right.
So.
There you go. I'll be like, in my experience, let me lay this out for you.
When he brought out the Velcro wallet, and in the silence, all you heard was,
I'm dead.
check, please.
Oh my gosh. All right, y'all. Well, thank you for tuning in. I am probably going to put something in show notes just linking to some of our care resources, just in case you want to find out more about counseling, or you're going through something and you really need the church to come alongside you and help you. So we would love to talk to you or pray for you about that. But thanks for tuning in. And I guess for our next episode, we'll see if Lydia's here.
Dear God, I hope that I am not. Hopefully by the time this airs, I've got a cute little guy who I'm toting around, but
It'll be great.
I need him to be an outside baby and not an inside baby anymore.
I can't wait. All right, y'all. We'll catch you next time on Tell Me More.